West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
In the week since news first broke of the federal indictment against Donald Trump, right around this time, last Thursday, one name has been brought up nearly just as often as the defendant himself, and that is of the judge assigned to the case, Judge Aileen Cannon. Lots of folks have wondered whether the Trump-appointed federal judge can truly run an impartial trial, particularly after she flagrantly ruled in favor of the ex-president during an early legal dispute over the classified documents last summer, a ruling that was so out of nowhere that it was quickly reversed by the appellate judges. But special counsel Jack Smith may have a backup plan. You see, while the Department of Justice charged Trump for illegally retaining the trove of classified documents he stole, he was not charged with disseminating those documents, even though prosecutors say he did just that twice at his New Jersey golf house. As lawyers Andrew Weissman and Ryan Goodman note in The Atlantic, Trump still could be charged with dissemination, especially if the special counsel's office believes Judge Cannon is putting her thumb on the scale again. Quote, if Aileen Cannon were to seek to pocket veto the charges before her by, say, scheduling the trial for after the 2024 presidential election, the special counsel will be able to sidestep her tactic by proceeding with charges in Jersey. Mary McCord is the former acting assistant attorney general for national security at the Department of Justice. She is co-host of the Prosecuting Donald Trump podcast. Deborah Pearlstein is a professor at Cardozo School of Law. She recently wrote an essay for the New York Times on the genius of leaving Trump's fate up to 12 ordinary Floridians. Both join me now. Deborah, let me start with you on that because it sort of gets to this question, right, of a fair shake and venue and doing it in Florida. What do you think about the Cannon conundrum, such as it is, and how to sort of think about it and having this trial in that judge's custody with a jury in Florida?
So thanks. It is a conundrum that the Justice Department is facing, but they've got to thread a remarkably narrow needle here in what they're trying to accomplish with this prosecution. They want to obviously see justice done. We all want to see that. But they're up against a clock. That is, this needs to be wrapped up or close before the 2024 election, or at least before the former president is reelected again, which remains a possibility. And they have to do this in a way that not only does justice, but contributes to the perception that justice is being done in a case that is this incredibly politically fraught. The risks, not just for the outcome of the case, but for the system more broadly, are enormously high. Going to Florida in the first place eliminates some risks. They were facing a risk that, for example, venue would be challenged if the case was brought in Washington, D.C. The Justice Department might well have actually prevailed ultimately, but it certainly would have been litigated. The former president would have been able to appeal. That takes time. Bringing it in Florida short circuits that process. And if the Justice Department can prevail there, it has a Florida verdict, a better chance than other options of potentially being taken seriously if it's just a bunch of ordinary Florida citizens than does a verdict rendered by a jury in what is typically considered a bluer state like New York, New Jersey, Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, on the sort of New Jersey part of this, Mary, so there's two things here. First, let's just talk about the charging document and the indictment as read, right, does have a little bit of a weird Bedminster mystery to it. Because stuff is clearly going to Bedminster. Like, he's packing up enough boxes that apparently his wife calls up Walt Nauta to be like, please, no, don't bring the boxes on the plane, right? So the boxes are going to Bedminster. We know we have in the indictment 2 times, right, showing the map to the guy from the super PAC and the other, you know, the nuclear secrets or the plan for Iran, right? In both those cases, that's happening at Bedminster, and yet Bedminster is never searched. It's not charged there. Like, so what do you make of that to begin with?
Well, I think that probably Jack Smith thought it was important to include these allegations in the indictment, just as a part of the storytelling of this, right? And to also signify the significance of this, because even though he did not charge dissemination of classified information or national defense information, to be more precise, based on this statute that was used, it helps to tell the story of what all was going on from the time Mr. Trump left the White House on January 20th through that search, through the execution of the search warrant. And that included not only obstructing the investigation by removing boxes, sorting through them, and not putting boxes back in the storage room where his attorney came to search for classified information and misleading his attorney about that, but it also included dissemination. But it would have been more challenging to charge those dissemination counts in Florida because, as you just indicated, and as the indictment reflects, they were shown to people in Bedminster. Now, there's a theory of a continuing offense if the documents originated in Mar-a-Lago. I mean, they originated in D.C., went to Mar-a-Lago, then went to Bedminster. There's a theory there. But again, just as Deborah said, it could have delayed things because there would have been motions to change venue on those counts in Florida. The other thing that could be going on is, you know, it's unclear from this indictment whether the department has all of the evidence it would need to prove up dissemination. In other words, does it have that document that he was showing? Do we really have it showing either to the 2 people who were working on Mark Meadows' autobiography or to the political action committee leader? And so, you know, there's still some things we don't know, but it is certainly possible that if something goes awry in Florida, it's certainly possible Jack Smith, if he does have that evidence, could bring a case probably relatively quickly in New Jersey.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess, so the question of, like, can you bring that is different than this sort of broader institutional question that Deborah, you're getting at here, right? Which just strikes me as, like, we're talking about this line, right? You want to zealously prosecute this. You also want to do it in a way that projects at all times fair play, no dirty pool, and not necessarily because you're going to insulate yourself from criticism from Donald Trump and his, you know, his cronies. That's going to happen anyway. But it is as a sort of almost testament to the thing you're trying to preserve, Deborah, right? I mean, sort of like theory and practice as one in how you go about doing this.
It's really true. And the prosecutor here, you know, interestingly, has prosecuted cases in more than one venue. He's not only prosecuted cases in the U.S. justice system, he's prosecuted international war crimes cases as well. And in both cases, and in here, in the United States, with a case of this kind of political salience, an unprecedented case in U.S. history of a former prosecution, it's more like we see in other countries where there's a risk of, does this look like politicized prosecution?
Right. It's a great point.
The criticisms we hear are not dissimilar from criticisms you hear in other countries when you face things like this. And he has to be, and I'm sure he is, cognizant of those and working to avoid them to the extent he can.
That's a very astute point. I mean, you know, war crimes prosecutions have been called victor's justice since back to Nuremberg, right? When our Chief Justice Robert Jackson was prosecuting them overseas. There's some more New York Times reporting on the boxes, Mary, that I think speaks to just how obsessed the guy appears to be with the contents and how much this is the opposite of what you would normally claim in this case. Like, if anything happened to my papers, I would be like, I have no idea. Like, I literally, I know where my papers are. I don't know what's in any box. Like, honestly, I swear to you. This is the opposite here. Here's the New York Times. Shortly after John Kelly took over Trump's chief of staff, Kelly and other aides grew concerned that some documents were likely presidential records might go missing if they were kept in the residence. They impressed upon him the papers had to be tracked, but he was not especially interested. Aides started examining the boxes to check for presidential records, but Trump still found ways to bring items to the residence. The boxes began to multiply. He could point to specific boxes he wanted to take with him on Air Force One when he was traveling and declined to take others, appearing aware of the contents inside the boxes he chose. What do you think the significance of that is?
Well, it's interesting because remember, even when he was in office, there was reporting that his aides said how difficult it was to
Yes.
keep him from, first of all, taking classified information back to his office, but also if he didn't like something, he ripped it up and they would have to tape it together because it was an official record. So this is part of his modus operandi, I think. And it's interesting because, we've talked before about what was his motive here. Why did he retain these classified documents at Mar-a-Lago? Why did he carry them with him everywhere? And, we've speculated about potential, use of monetizing of these or using them as leverage in his own business relationships or potentially with foreign governments or foreign companies. But it's also quite possible that it was just purely his weird attachment. His own employee, as alleged in the indictment, called these the beautiful mind boxes, that he has this weird attachment to things. And, it sounds a little bit like that's a petty and not a significant motive, but it could be that there are other motives as well. But it definitely seems there's a lot of support for the fact that he really he felt like these were his. He wanted to keep them. He didn't want to give them up.
He's on Truth Social within the hour, all caps, demanding they return the papers to him.
It is Friday, the 16th of June of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all-night hawks in the Diner of Life. That's right. You can put that in your hopper. Hey, my grandson officially graduates. He gets his diploma tomorrow, and I'm going to go see that and spend part of the day with them, and then make my trek back from Salem back down here to the southern reaches of Oregon State. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Now, I'm hoping that they give him his diploma. I hear that some schools are denying students, graduates, their diplomas on stage if they dance. What? Yeah, apparently some Muslim girl was getting her diploma, and her parents clapped, and then she sort of did a little shimmy or something, like arms up, in victory, and a little shimmy with a smile. And the person, director, whomever of the school who was handing out the diploma, scolded her on the stage and would not give her diploma. Now, the school has since apologized and given her diploma, but you can't, give back the whole event that took place while she's up on stage with this director directing her. All right. No dancing. Apparently, we're some sort of religious sect that doesn't allow that. Okay, right. I think really what they were trying to get across is that, if everybody starts giving out a whoop and a holler, it really slows the proceedings down, and we have to have a bit of decorum. All right. Okay. Well, I guess since we still have schools, I don't know how much longer we will have them. Apparently, they're going to be considered woke, and they have to get rid of them. And so, I suppose while we still have schools, we have to be reminded, really, what a bunch of weirdos sometimes are in there. Don't dance. Okay, no dancing, kid. Okay, but all that aside, I'm looking forward to that. And I guess I will now officially find out what law school he has chosen to attend, since he had scores and scores that said, yeah, come on to our school. And many of them want to give him a full ride. All 3 years. So good. I guess he impressed a few people. Must have. Okay, so what do we have coming up? I'll tell you what we have coming up. The weekend as well. And we know what that means now. Since Trump came down that escalator, everything has been escalating. Okay. I love his latest tirade. Well, not latest tirade, but one of his latest tirades in which he's going off about that he's going to, sick his DOJ onto the Biden crime family. I'm trying to figure out what he means by that. He says the whole family is corrupt and crime-ridden. Really? Did Hunter get $2 billion from the Saudis? I don't think so. And we actually have a related story about that. And it might not be so good for all these people who caved to the bonesaw government. No. But anyway, it looks like, you might have a few problems coming up your way, Danny. A few more than expected. At the top there about the Bedminster mystery. Now, I did mention, and I maybe a little tongue-in-cheek, but there are some grave implications there that Jack Smith has dug into already. Okay, just so you know, I just wanted to get that off my chest. All right. So, yeah. And apparently, as well, the GOP continue to be accomplices to a crime, and they hide it behind the speech and debate clause. We're just legislating our corruption. Really, are you now? But yeah, so Trump was out there publicly proclaiming in all caps, because he speaks in all caps too, that he's going to come after Joe. And I'm still trying to figure out, like, as Joe told the White House press corps when they said, what's it like being one of the most corrupt, crime-ridden families in the world? And Joe said, well, where's the money? It's like this Soros money they keep accusing us of having. I'd like to have some. I worked hard for it. Just give me the interest. Only the interest, and I'd be buying yachts like Bezos. See that? He's got a new yacht. New babe, too. He likes to take pictures of babes on the bow of his boat. No one calls it a boat, but it's a big yacht, mega yacht. Probably flies. Never know with these guys anymore. I wonder if it's driven by AI. Alexander Irving. He's the new boat captain, I'm sure. Or is that something else? We don't know. It's Friday. And have we been dipping into the French 77s? Not really, but I'd like to. I can't. I don't have a headache tomorrow. This isn't party time. I want to be festive. It's kind of weird. I don't really, do any of us party like that anymore? Of course not. We don't. Don't have the time, the inclination, or the physical capabilities of being able to handle it. I don't know about you. I don't like headaches, no matter how much water I drink. So, what else? What else? Well, what else is there to say? Well, I'll tell you what else there is to say. We will go right into what we have curated for you, because there's so much more that I could rant on, and I figure, hey, it's Friday. Why don't we get right into these news reads, and we'll do it there. So, as we begin here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, a bipartisan Senate bill would seize the paychecks of executives overseeing failed banks. Well, it's about time. Except I like the bipartisanship of it. There's one that's, I don't know. Their side, eh. The Justice Department has begun investigating the PGA Tour LIV Golf merger. It is pronounced LIV. And that's a good thing. So, yeah, all you golfers out there that caved, all right. And all of you PGA Tour guys, I just want to know what was the offer that you couldn't refuse? I wonder. And a massive hack of the Oregon DMV system has put an estimated 3.5 million driver license and ID card info at risk. Thanks. I just renewed my license. After the break, we move to the chef's table where, speaking of which, state-backed Chinese hackers broke into the networks of hundreds of public and private sector organizations around the globe, and most of them were government organizations. So, just saying. Heavy-duty trucks driving by again. Don't you like that? I don't. And support mounts for Stoltenberg to stay on in NATO's top job. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Page at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, and we thank Kelly for doing so. Also, she will be attending Netroots Nation this year in Chicago, so we look forward to that. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it really does help. And how does it help? I'll tell you how it helps. Your recurring patronage of what might possibly be, if you could buy us an espresso type coffee drink once a month, we would apply those funds to putting a big dent in our bills and all the other costs incurred in running this powerhouse of resistance. And so thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, and Spoutable at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary, incidentally, on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. And you can always find the show notes and links diaries by following my social media feed. So why don't you? Okay, thanks. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, you can do so at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay, tisk tisk. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is out of the Washington Post by Tori Newmeyer. Senators overseeing the banking industry are taking their first step in an attempt to punish executives who preside over failures like the March collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Senators Sherrod Brown, yay, and Tim Scott, the leaders of the Senate Banking Committee, yesterday Thursday unveiled a bill empowering regulators to sink bank executives' compensation from the 24 months leading up to a failure. In addition to their salaries, executives could be forced to forfeit bonuses and profits from the sale of bank stock. The bill also triples to $3 million the civil penalty that regulators could assess on an executive who recklessly violates the law or engages in unsafe and unsound practices. Financial regulators continue to investigate the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, whose failure rattled the sector and led to federal intervention. The introduction of the bill from Brown and Scott came on the same day as a Wall Street Journal report that said the Federal Reserve and the Securities and Exchange Commission are examining the role of Goldman Sachs, which bought SVB Securities' portfolio while advising the troubled bank on raising capital before it folded. Goldman Sachs acknowledged in a May filing that it is cooperating and providing information to various governmental bodies in connection with their investigations and inquiries into Silicon Valley Bank's collapse. As SFB's collapse came a few years after it embarked on a push for rapid growth. An April 28th report from the Federal Reserve placed the bulk of the blame for the bank's crash on lax oversight by regulators and mismanagement by executives. It also sharply criticized consultants who failed to design an effective program for assessing SFB's problems. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays is by the Associated Press by way of the Los Angeles Times. The Justice Department has begun to examine an agreement between the PGA Tour and Saudi Arabian backers of Live Golf to determine whether it violates federal antitrust statutes. A person familiar with the matter told the AP. The inquiry is in its early stages, and it is not clear yet whether the Justice Department would take any enforcement action, the person said. The person was not authorized to speak publicly about details of the inquiry, and they spoke to the Associated Press on the condition they don't let anyone know who they are. The Wall Street Journal first reported the Justice Department's involvement. We are confident that once all stakeholders learn about how the PGA Tour will lead this new venture, they will understand how it benefits our players, fans, and sport while protecting the American institution of golf, the PGA Tour said in a statement, not mentioning anything about national security and what that might mean for the future of golf. The PGA Tour, European Tour, and Saudi Arabia's National Wealth Fund came together in a partnership that was negotiated so privately over 2 months that none of the players were aware. Well, that's what you do with a bone saw. You cut people off. PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan had been critical of Live Golf since the rival circuit began poaching some of the golf's biggest names with signing bonuses of $100 million or more. The PGA Tour suspended players who defected to Live, such as lefty Phil Mickelson, leading to 11 players and eventually Live to file an antitrust lawsuit against the PGA Tour last August. The PGA Tour then filed a countersuit, and the case was not expected to go to trial at least until 2024. Part of the agreement is to drop all litigation. One motivation for the PGA Tour joining with the Saudis was the financial drain from legal fees on lawsuits that were nowhere close to being resolved. The Justice Department already was looking into antitrust issues since last summer. Colby of the Oregonian brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The Oregon Driver and Motor Vehicle Services confirmed yesterday, Thursday, that an estimated 3.5 million driver's license and identification card files were compromised when the agency was hacked 2 weeks ago. Agency spokesperson Michelle Godfrey said that the agency realized on Monday, 4 days ago, that the breach had extended to about 90% of the state's driver's license and ID card files. The Oregonian first made inquiries about the security breach on Wednesday. DMV officials took nearly a day to respond with answers. Godfrey said the agency planned to wait until today, Friday, to go public because officials are still preparing agency employees for how to respond to Oregonians' questions and concerns about how to protect themselves. Godfrey advised the public to monitor credit reports for signs of fraudulent activity. Well, thanks. She said state officials became aware on June 1st that the agency's system had been hacked. 2 hours later, the systems were locked down, but we didn't have any information about what the data may have been affected at the time, she said. It's taken days of analysis to determine that the hack compromised the state's driver's license and ID records. That took it to a whole new level, she said. After the news organization's inquiry, the Department of Transportation issued a press release saying the agency was among many organizations affected by the breach as a result of a global hack of the data transfer software MoveIt Transfer. Chief Information Officer Thomas Amato said the agency delayed informing the public out of the security concerns and because we have been trying to put in place things to prepare Oregonians for this announcement. Boy, that doesn't sound good. He said the state did not want to reveal too much evidence to the actual threat actors who could use our verification of their attack as leverage, and also to be able to prepare the kinds of resources to present it to the people of Oregon. Still sounds bad. The agency has used the popular file sharing tool since 2015. On June 1st, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency issued a 0-day vulnerability alert that said the software had a vulnerability that could allow an attacker to take over an affected system. A third-party security specialist determined that multiple files had been accessed by unauthorized actors before the agency received the official alert. Okay, I guess we'll be keeping our eye on that. Let us now go to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You were listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, That Said. I hate multiverse stories. Sure, you get the paths not taken and free will versus fate and the there's no place like homes, but very quickly you fall into eroding the integrity of your characters among their many alternate versions, and also into dulling my emotional connection to your protagonist. Why should I care about this Spider-Man saving this world when there are a million gajillion others? Even worse in multiverse stories is when the narrative takes a backseat to the meta-narrative, and all your protagonist's crucial emotional beats weaken into iterated tropes. And I see these traps in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. I also see how it is postmodern hip-hop storytelling with its narrative sampling, its remixing of storylines, and its self-referencing, which becomes kind of annoying for me, but is probably just right for a younger, more modern-centered audience. That said, Across the Spider-Verse mostly dodges these traps and has the most amazing animation I've seen in a long time. There's so much energy and vibrancy and life and creativity and intelligence and heart in what these people have put out, it's overwhelming. Directors Joaquim Dos Santos, Kemp Powers, and Justin K. Thompson, along with production designer Patrick O'Keefe and art directors Dean Gordon and Aries Khalid, have outdone their predecessors. Okay, 3 of them worked on Into the Spider-Verse, but only 1 in the same job. They have so embraced the freedom of animation to be a straight IV drip from their imaginations, and it's so powerful to see them mix color schemes and textures and styles all to serve character realization and story development. I watched trailers for Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, and the latest Trolls movie before Across the Spider-Verse, and they looked like pieces of bubblegum sitting before a full-course meal. I still don't like multiverse stories. That said, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse is a hell of a multiverse story. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at take2moviereview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, and welcome to Cosmos Quickly. This is Lee Billings.
And this is Corinne Leong.
Corinne, thanks so much for being here. Quick question for you. What's super duper bright and hundreds or even thousands of times heavier than our entire solar system, yet it's so hard to find that it has yet to be directly seen? It's not a good riddle, I admit. The answer, though, is a population 3 star. That's astronomer lingo for the very first stars in the universe, which formed from dense clouds of pristine hydrogen and helium that filled the cosmos in the first few 100 million years after the Big Bang. Those conditions should have allowed population 3 stars to bulk up to proportions impossible for more chemically enriched modern-day stars to achieve.
Right, okay. And these massive stars were also foundational for everything else we see in the universe today, right? So they were important cosmic ingredients that set the table for the evolution of things like galaxies and black holes, other types of stars, planets, and, of course, us.
Right, exactly, yes. So we're talking about them today because scientists may have kind of, sort of, seen them for the very first time.
How do you only kind of, sort of see an ultra-luminous, gigantic star?
Right. Well, these stars formed a very long time ago, which in cosmic terms also means to see them, we have to look for them very, very, very far away. They also didn't last very long due to how quickly they burned through all their stellar fuel. Each one existed for just a few million years, it's thought. These are bright but brief candles. Astronomers have to somehow see across a gap that encompasses almost the entire visible universe.
So let me guess. That must mean even observatories probably couldn't take an actual picture of a population 3 star. So maybe scientists look for their more subtle effects, and they have to use the biggest, best thing we've got. Drumroll, please. The James Webb Space Telescope, am I right?
Bingo! Right you are. The James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST for short, was custom built to see the light from these first stars. So recently, 2 independent teams did just that, using JWST to look for population 3 stars. One team, led by Roberto Maiolino at the University of Cambridge, studied a galaxy called GNZ11 from just 400 million years post-Big Bang. Using a technique called spectroscopy, they were able to see that the light shining from the galaxy's edges seemed to come from very hot sources rich in helium, but essentially devoid of heavier elements. Those are probably clouds of pristine gas in the galaxy's outskirts that are studded with population 3 stars. The other team, led by Eros Van Zella at the National Institute for Astrophysics in Italy, used a massive galaxy cluster as a starlight magnifying gravitational lens to zoom in on a tiny background galaxy from about 800 million years post-Big Bang. And they found spectroscopic signs that the galaxy harbored 2 star-packed clumps with record-breaking low levels of elements heavier than helium. It's another possible sign of population 3 stars.
Okay, so we're maybe seeing traces of these things. It's like we're seeing the light from the super bright source. We can't see the source exactly, but the colors of light it shines are telling us that it's coming from really pure primordial stuff.
Basically, yeah, you got it.
But outside of a simple existence proof, though, what else might this be telling us?
Well, If Maialino's team has in fact seen population 3 stars, their data suggests each would weigh at least 500 times as much as our sun. Now that generally fits with predictions, but having a bona fide confirmation would show us we're really on the right track in understanding our stellar forebears. And among other things, the result from Vanzella's team is showing just how enormous the boost to JWST can be from galaxy cluster gravitational lenses. It's paving the way for future JWST studies that, if we're lucky, might ultimately even resolve individual population 3 stars. Think of that. An actual image from across the depths of cosmic time, capturing one of the very first stars that ever was. It'd probably be just a little dot or smear of light, though.
Sure, but it'd still be one of the most impressive baby pictures ever made, right? Well worth including in a photo album. Thank you for listening to Cosmos Quickly. Our show is produced by Tulika Bose, Jeff Delvicio, Kelso Harper. Oh, and me! Our music was composed by Dominic Smith.
Like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And for more science news, please go to scientificamerican.com.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. Occasional aches and pains are an expected part of life, but for many people, pain is a constant companion. Dr. Chad Helmick is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. He's joining us today to discuss ways to manage chronic pain. Welcome to the show, Chad.
Thank you.
Chad, how many people in the U.S. suffer from chronic pain?
In 2016, 50 million adults had chronic pain, which is pain on most or every day in the past 6 months. More interesting, though, is that 20 million people have high-impact chronic pain, which is chronic pain that also limits their work or life activities on most or every day in the past 6 months. This is a problem because chronic pain is associated not only with symptoms, but with anxiety and depression, reduced quality of life, and the risk of opioid problems.
What are the most common causes of chronic pain?
The most common causes generally relate to bones and joints, like low back pain and arthritis, but there are many other causes: headaches, sickle cell disease, fibromyalgia, surgery and injuries, and many, many others.
Is chronic pain more common in any particular group of people?
Yes, it occurs at all ages, but it's more common in older middle-aged adults and in the oldest 85 and older. It's also more common in women, poor people, and those who live in rural areas.
How is chronic pain treated?
Well, the first thing to do is to get a diagnosis, which can help guide treatment. But the thinking about chronic pain now is that it becomes a chronic disease by itself, regardless of the cause, and that can cause significant problems. The real goal in management is to have a manageable level of pain, not to get rid of all pain. There's several steps that can be taken, and these are sometimes difficult to do because of barriers to access. But it makes sense to do the simplest and safest things first. And these are non-drug steps. Things like physical activity. Walking is perfectly good to help reduce pain. Also, self-management education can give you some confidence in managing chronic pain when you're on your own. There's also physical therapy, occupational therapy, psychological therapy, better sleep, which usually means less alcohol, and seeing a chiropractor or getting biofeedback and massage. If that's not enough, non-opioid drugs like Tylenol or Motrin and Advil or naproxen or Aleve can help. If those don't work, then it's time to consider something stronger. Sometimes that's opioids, but there's not great evidence that opioids are good for long-term pain in most people.
Do you have any advice for people suffering from chronic pain?
Well, it's important to work with a variety of providers who are working together to help you. The goal, again, is manageable pain so you can live a productive life. This can include physical therapy, most people can walk, to treat any underlying depression or anxiety, and to avoid further injuries. Finally, the National Pain Strategy is laying out a strategic roadmap to improve pain management system in this country.
Where can listeners get more information about managing chronic pain?
Listeners can go to the NIH website, nih.gov, and type in National Pain Strategy.
Thanks, Chad. I've been talking today with Dr. Chad Helmick about ways to manage chronic pain. If you're experiencing daily pain, talk with your healthcare provider to ensure you have the correct diagnosis and know how to manage your condition. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Donna Phillips. Today we continue our series on Principles of the Constitution as part of our Civil Discourse and American Legacy project. We are joined by special guest Dr. Lester Brooks, American History Professor Emeritus from Anne Arundel Community College. Welcome, Dr. Brooks.
Thank you.
Dr. Brooks, what were the major issues of the Philadelphia Convention?
One key issue was the introduction of two plans of government to the delegates at Philadelphia. One plan, drafted primarily by James Madison, was the Virginia Plan. A second plan, drafted by William Patterson, was the New Jersey Plan. And the delegates would have to discuss these two plans. Another key issue would be the separation of powers. Instead of a unicameral legislature, as provided by the Articles of Confederation, there would be the separation of powers, a bicameral legislature. Also, there would be an executive branch, legislative branch, and a judicial branch of government. So these two were key issues that are going to take a lot of discussion by the delegates at Philadelphia.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Brooks. That's all for today's podcast. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1836. That was the day that the London Working Men's Association was founded. Skilled craftsmen started the organization. William Lovett, a cabinet maker, and a publisher by the name of Henry Hetherington were two of the original founders. Their aim was to promote the rights of the working class. 2 years later, the group drafted the People's Charter. The document outlined a demand for 6 reforms aimed at making the government more inclusive of the working class. One reform was universal suffrage for all males over the age of 21. Another was ending the requirement that members of Parliament hold property, which excluded most British people from standing for elections. The charter also called for the establishment of fairer parliamentary electoral districts, holding of annual elections, and allowing for a secret or anonymous ballot. The final item was payment for those elected to Parliament. Since it was an unpaid office, people who could not afford to go without a salary were practically shut out of running. Those who supported these measures came to be known as Chartists. The movement grew and garnered support. More than 1 million people signed a petition for the charter. Parliament, however, ignored the petition, but the movement continued to grow. It inspired newspapers, rallies, and even poetry. One poem published in 1841 included the lines, "'Tis the voice of the people I hear on high. It peals o'er the mountain, it soars to the sky. Its shock, like the earthquake, shall fill with dismay the hearts of the tyrants and sweep them away." Chartism as a movement lasted for 2 decades. But it was not until 1918 that all British men won the right to vote. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 62 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs around 90 or maybe a little bit more here at the mothership. Should be sunny to partly cloudy throughout the day, with winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Partly cloudy skies early this evening will give way to cloudy skies later. Lows in the upper 50s, winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then mostly cloudy tomorrow with highs near 80. A bit of a drop-off in temperature. Winds out of the west-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And we still have a forecast for thunderstorms and rain Sunday late through Monday. We'll continue hoping that might happen without the wildfires. Grass pollen is the pollen of predominance here in the little town of Rogue River, and it is rated very high. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 35 parts per million, come up a little bit since yesterday. But that daytime UV index remains very high at 9, and so continue to take care. Barometric pressure continues to rise ever so slightly to 30.14 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is down to 70% and falling. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that's why it's not only known, but is the Weather Underground. London is 81 degrees and fair. Paris is 85 and sunny. Rome is 85 and sunny. Kyiv is 81 and partly cloudy. Kabul is 76 and clear. Hong Kong is 78 degrees with light rain. Tokyo is 72 and fair. Sydney, Australia is 44 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees, mostly cloudy, and they continue to have a small craft advisory on the bay for heavy fog. And New York is 80 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Of the Associated Press brings us this burst of amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Suspected state-backed Chinese hackers used a security hole in a popular email security appliance to break into networks of hundreds of public and private sector organizations globally, nearly a third of them government agencies, including foreign ministries, the cybersecurity firm Mandiant said yesterday, Thursday. This is the broadest cyber espionage campaign known to be conducted by a China Nexus threat actor since the mass exploitation of Microsoft Exchange in early 2021. And that was Charles Carmichael, Mandiant's chief technical officer, said in an email statement. That hack compromised tens of thousands of computers globally. In a blog post yesterday, Thursday, Google-owned Mandiant expressed high confidence that the group exploiting a software vulnerability in Barracuda Network's email security gateway was engaged in espionage activity in support of the People's Republic of China. It said the activity began as early as October. The hacker sent emails containing malicious file attachments to gain access to targeted organizations, devices, and data. Of those organizations, 55% were from the Americas, 22% from Asia Pacific, and 24% from Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and they included the foreign ministries in Southeast Asia, foreign trade offices, and academic organizations in Taiwan and Hong Kong, the company said. Mandiant said the majority impact in the Americas may partially reflect the geography of Barracuda's customer base. The company announced on June 6 that some of its email security appliances had been hacked as early as October, giving the intruders a backdoor into compromised networks. The hack was so severe, the California company recommended fully replacing the appliances. After discovering it in mid-May, Barracuda released containment and remediation patches, but the hacking group, which Mandiant identifies as UNC 4841, altered their malware to try to maintain access. The group then countered with high-frequency operations, targeting a number of victims located in at least 16 different countries. Word of the breach arrived with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken departing for China this weekend as part of the Biden administration's push to repair deteriorating ties between Washington and Beijing. His visit had initially been planned for early this year, but was postponed indefinitely after the discovery and shoot-down of what the U.S. said was a Chinese spy balloon over the United States.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Support mounted for NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg to have his mandate at the head of the world's biggest security organization extended yet again, as Denmark's Prime Minister ruled herself out of the running. Stoltenberg, a former Norwegian Prime Minister, has been NATO's top civilian official since 2014. His term was due to expire last year, but was extended to keep a steady hand at the helm after Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February of 2022. U.S. President Joe Biden and his NATO counterparts are due to choose a successor when they meet for a summit in Vilnius, Lithuania on July 11th and 12th. No candidate has been proposed publicly, and leaders usually decide by consensus on who should be appointed. NATO is keen to name a woman to the top post, and Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen was thought to be a favorite after a meeting with Biden earlier this month. In a televised interview yesterday, Thursday, Frederiksen said, "No, I am not on my way to NATO." But she did say she would back Stoltenberg if he was willing to extend his mandate. Stoltenberg himself has said he will not seek a fourth extension to his mandate. An economist by training, he was due to become the next governor of the Norwegian Central Bank when the simmering conflict in Ukraine escalated to full-scale war last year. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here on Monday. right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.